Yo, welcome to a Mouse Plus video. I am MF Mouse. I like FPS games. I play COD, Overwatch, and now Valorant. I'm sorry, okay? Please, back up. I also like roguelike games. My favorites being Binding of Isaac, Risk of Rain 2, and Dead Cells. Let me ask you a question. What would happen if you took FPS games, first-person shooters, and roguelites, and then you went like this? You would get the subgenre known as FPS Roguelites, and in this video we'll be diving deeper into the FPS Roguelike genre, which features a lot of fantastic indie games that I enjoy and tried out over the last couple months. Hopefully you can find a good recommendation, and if you watch through and like my video, why not give me a delectable subscription? To start things off, I'm going to talk about one of my favorites of this subgenre, which is Gunfire Reborn and its recent DLC release. Gunfire Reborn is a first-person roguelite where players control a variety of different anthropomorphic animals. I will never beat the furry allegations. This is definitely one of my favorites of this subgenre. It has a huge cast of characters, a fuckload of weapons, spells, and types of builds that you can go for. I have over 100 hours in this game, all of the achievements, and I still think it's really fun to play and just go through and blast it. I do think balance-wise the game is kind of solved in that the best builds are, very obvious to go for, even though there are a few strategies that are straight broken, like miasma builds or shotgun bird. Overall, the gameplay is tight and very engaging. As of right now, there's a total of 3 main stages, each with 2 boss variants, and then a final optional boss you can do at the end of your run, which is this cool giant bear guy that shoots you with like a bunch of guns and shit. There's a bunch of challenge rooms throughout your journey that you can use to beef up your run, and there's a lot of options that you can go for that really influence your build. The thing with this game is that it's just so dense. Everything interacts with and scales off of each other. You got 3 spiritual blessings, scrolls, talents, weapon Gemini, and inscriptions. I love the inscriptions in this game. They're essentially modifiers that you get on your weapons and change how many projectiles you can shoot, your crit damage, your element, and the big thing here are the legendary inscriptions. If you're a fan of roguelike games, I would really give this game a shot. There are just so many click moments. But Mousy Boy, what is a click moment? Why did you write that into your script? It sounds so corny. A click moment is a moment in a roguelike game where your build comes to fruition. There are just so many moments where you'll read how an ability works or how an upgrade functions, and you'll just be like, oh, that works freaking perfectly for my build, wow. Going back to the legendary inscriptions, you can compare these to the red text on legendary weapons from the Borderlands series, except in this game you can get multiple legendary inscriptions, and some of their effects are pretty nuts. And the cool thing about legendary inscriptions is that some of them are global, it can go on each weapon, but you can also get weapon-specific ones that really change how the weapon functions. But we should also go into how insane the weapons are themselves. Like, I wish Borderlands would get this wacky. You got true melee weapons with swords, bomb lizards, laser gloves, freaking dragon gun. The designs are so fun, and when you pick up something new, it feels really fresh to wonder what the fuck it's gonna do when you press M1. I think this type of weapon generation just works so well for a roguelite, since you can find the perfect weapon for your build or use the reroll system to influence it a bit more. Now, the craftsman reroll system is very, very strong. I would say that's one flaw with this game, is that with so many weapons, you're kind of incentivized to just hold on to one and then keep upgrading it over and over, but there are still ways that you can influence your build outside of that. You have a multitude of shops, craftsmen, and the player choice is just a huge strength for the internal design of this game. I mean, the cast is stacked, and there's definitely some inspiration from Borderlands here, which I love. You got the Gunzerker with the dual-wielding guns, the Siren with lockdown elemental powers, I mean even Bloodwing. No, that's just a bird, actually. The graphics are kind of low fidelity and kind of look like clay, but I think it's simple enough that it doesn't get in the way of the really fun gameplay. Though I will say, learning the animations and telegraphed moves of enemies is actually really important, because we have to talk about the balance. In co-op, this game is pretty easy because you can just keep reviving each other and you don't die while you're holding revive if you have all the upgrades. In single player though, this game can get pretty hard because you only have one revive and one misstep can just perma burst you all the way down to 1 HP. I think the balance swings wildly from easy to hard, and a lot of people in the community have made up their own rule sets to make the game a bit harder for themselves, which I think is fairly interesting. 1.0 came out a while ago, and recently the DLC Visitors of Spirit Realm dropped, which was insanely worth it at $7. The DLC added a new skill system, 2 new characters, more weapons, a whole new game mode. I mean, it was just really worth it and fun. Gunfire Reborn is pure, unbridled action shoot guy gameplay with interesting mechanics and important choices to make in terms of roguelike decisions. It's honestly shot up to one of my favorite roguelites of all time and one of the first-person shooter ones to really grab me. Out of all the games I'm going to talk about today, I would say the closest competitor to Gunfire Reborn is Roboquest. It's undergone a ton of reworks and changes, and each content update honestly makes this game better. Roboquest is currently in early access, and from the first level, you can tell it has a post-apocalyptic barren robot desert kind of vibe to it. Obviously, with this namesake, you play as a robot who wields a bunch of different wacky guns. I don't want to draw comparisons to that game again, but I think a few of the gun designs probably took inspiration from Borderlands. You got a whole group of guns that just look like bandit guns. There's 4 classes and a bunch of gadgets you can choose from to start out with. The classes all feel pretty distinct and unique in their own ways. You got a shield boy, stealth boy, engineer boy, and a rocket boy. They all got their different upgrades and abilities and pretty fun to play. There's a great amount of cool familiar guns like dual Uzis and the AK-47, but there's also cool sci-fi laser weapons and blasters. Every gun also has a chance to roll an alternate fire that can definitely add some variety to your arsenal. The comic book onomatopoeia recoil and response from these guns feel really great, and alongside the very fast-paced movement, the gameplay definitely rivals Gunfire Reborn for me. You got sliding, sprinting, double jumps, and also fun little sonic rails all over the maps, which makes the movement that much more fun and less reliant on simply gaining a movement speed stat. I really enjoy how much of a focus movement has here. As with many roguelites, leveling up gives you a choice, and I think there are interesting ways to build up perks, and you also have some options that basically give you better base stats. These differ from character to character, and from my hours in the game, it's been pretty fun to theorycraft different archetypes you can go for. Roboquest does a great job at encouraging fast-paced gameplay. You have scratch damage, which is like gray health you can recover if you go ham. Health drops on the ground after you kill an enemy, but they expire after a certain amount of time. Finishing a level fast and efficiently also nets you better meta currencies used outside of a run for extra upgrades, since you're scored on how fast you complete the level and how much enemies you cleared. The game is still in development, but honestly, it is in a very enjoyable state right now. On the road to 1.0, I can see the potential of this game stacking up to Gunfire Reborn. Can't wait to see what the future brings to this game, and I'm rooting for him. I like it. It's a fun game. Bees make honey. Last time I talked about Deadlink on this channel, I compared it to the roguelite Hades and the FPS Doom Eternal, and while I don't think it's near the levels of polish of either of those two games, I think it's definitely worth checking out. In Deadlink, you play a cybernetic shell in a training simulation and are tasked with shooting robots and mans through different stages so far. There are currently 3 classes in the game. You got the Soldier, the Hunter has an elemental beam gun, and a Zero-style decoy and translocator. Pretty cool. And you also got the recently added Engineer, who of course has a sentry gun and a Demo Man grenade launcher, and I will stop comparing games to other games because you are essentially going room through room choosing Hades styled rewards until you reach the boss and go to the next stage. As of right now, there's only 2 stages, but I'm sure they'll be adding more and more as the development continues on. The environments in this game lean into the Japanese influenced cyberpunk style. If you know me, I'm not a huge fan of. I think it's really overplayed and sometimes kind of boring at this point. But I think a bigger highlight are the enemies in this game, with the cool sumo guy, geishas, and spider tanks. I think the enemies harbor a lot more of the style than the environments as of now, but I'm sure that polish will get added in later on. The shooting and movement feels really nice. All of the classes have different movement skills, and their weapons are fairly interesting and satisfying to use. You sometimes also get slow-mo, which is fun, and once you get into the Doom-esque groove of switching weapons using your skills on cooldown, the game feels insanely good and flows really well. A really cool mechanic of the game is the implant system. Every implant has an active and passive ability and a battery charge requirement. Then you attach it to whatever skill you want to proc it with, which really lets you flex your build and kind of theory craft your rotation, since you're thinking of what procs what and what you want to use in what order. It's really cool. You also got shops, alternate weapons, and other passives you can add on to your character. I think everything in this game is super promising, and even though it's still pretty early in development, there's a huge amount of potential here, and the 20 to 30 minute runs are really fun so far. I actually played Nightmare Reaper back in early access, but never went too deep into it. It fully launched in 2022, and I decided to give it another try specifically for this video. It's more of a boomer shooter take on the FPS Roguelite genre, where you play as a woman in a psychiatric ward and fight nightmares in your head as you try to piece together the crazy narrative. It has progression, an insane amount of weapons, interesting set pieces, and really intense gameplay. Start off in the musky cave level, and after you beat the tutorial, you wake up in the hospital and realize you're in a mental asylum of some sort, and every time you drift off to sleep, you're playing your own nightmares. But to be honest, it's really fun, so I welcome the voices in my head. After beating each level, you wake up in the hospital to explore or read some of the lore that's left for you before you head into another level. Early on, you run into this cartridge for a game called Nightmare Reaper, which that's a little meta, but you plop that into your Game Boy and you get this fake Mario minigame skill tree that's really neat looking. This sets up the different skill trees you get throughout the game that emulate other games like the aforementioned Mario or games like Pokemon. Now, if you don't want to play these minigames to get your skills, you can disable them, which I did that, but it's still kind of cool and neat that they did that. This is the main way you upgrade your character, and you start unlocking new mechanics like a grappling hook or a dash as you progress through your skill trees. Nightmare Reaper ended up having a lot more depth than I thought it would, and it's probably good to mention that there is a sizable amount of content here. You stay in one area for 3 levels before you go to like the next chapter. They're pretty varied and new enemies show up here and there. I will say that the pacing of this game is a bit on the slower and drawn out side with how long it takes to get certain mechanics or progress to new environments, and sometimes they feel a little bit samey. But something that makes up for that is the fuckload of weapons. The huge arsenal of weapons here can all roll with different positive or negative stats, just like any good roguelike. The weapons range from magical to military, or just straight up silly like pirate ship cannon weapon, which that's fucking awesome. The modifiers that can roll on the weapons are also really interesting. You can get elemental effects, random projectiles, free shots, or even lifesteal. I breezed through the first chunk of this game pretty easily, but in the later levels, it got pretty difficult and started kicking my ass. And there were a couple times I got a bit stuck because at the end of each level, you can only choose one weapon to take with you. So if I took something new and it ended up being bad, I would kind of just keep dying at the start of the next level until I found something good. Even some of the base weapons with no modifiers can be really good. Some of my favorites being the Swarm Launcher and dual P90s. But the weapon generation can be pretty sick. One weapon I want to mention I got was a simple pump shotgun that rolled with random projectiles on it, and the random projectile I got was the pirate ship cannonball. So my shotgun was just spawning like 10 cannonballs every time I shot it, and it just felt like some Gary's Mod shit, and it was really cool. The monsters are fairly interesting. The little pink balls that walk around and explode can go fuck themselves though. Sometimes you just get fucking swarmed with them. But other than that, you got demons, big old boys, flying creeps, zombies, laser guys. I think they're fine, but the gore here and how the weapons sound all coalesce into some pretty satisfying gunplay. The music is very Doom-esque. You get really heavy, drudging guitar riffs that play through as you just absolutely shred through hordes of enemies. Overall, Nightmare Reaper is really fun. I can easily recommend this to anyone who likes boomer shooters, who's interested in other roguelike indies, and yeah, easy recommend right there. Now, there was a lot more games I wanted to play for this video, but I've been sitting on this script for months, and to be honest, I just don't have the time. Maybe I'll just do a different video for that, because I play these games really sporadically. I won't just sit down and play like 10 games in a month like that. So yeah, maybe in the future I'll just do a spotlight on a single video, unless you like these bigger form of kind of overviews that I did, like with this one or the Vampire Survivors one. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that brief look into these different FPS roguelites. Some fun games here if you're a gamer. Just on a personal note, I did start a new job recently, so video content on here and at MFMouse2 will slow down a little bit. I'm still on a decent pace, but yeah, hope you liked my video. Please subscribe if you made it to the end. I really appreciate that. And yeah, have a wonderful day. I will see you later. Bye.